Good morning, friends. Welcome to Gyan channel. Today we will discuss about history, growth, and development of media in India. This will be our first part. In this, we will be covering about evolution of journalism, short history of print journalism in India, role of English press in origin, growth, development of journalism in India, origin, growth, development of news agencies in India, and role of press in pre-independence and post-independence India. So, first of all, we discuss about evolution of journalism. Acta Diurna, that is also called Journal of the Day, was the earliest known journal. It is a handwritten news bulletin distributed in the Forum Romanum. It was the first century BC during the times of Julius Caesar. The first journalism started in the first century BC. The first printed newspaper appeared in Peking, that is now it has become Beijing, in 8th century AD. Chinese did the printing using separate wooden block for type which could be used over and over again. Koreans also followed the Chinese. Printing in and paper were developed in China and Egypt, but the whole process of printing had a stunted growth in Asia. Europeans, on the other hand, used the new process on large scale. They benefited from the popularization of printing, which led to the advent of affordable books and popular newspapers. This also led to the democratization of communication. Printing led to the third major revolution in communication, first having been the development of human speech and then art of presenting sound written using alphabets. With the spread of printing, libraries and schools sprang up. Books, libraries, higher education all led to major political, socio-economic and cultural changes in Europe. The new modes of agricultural and mechanical production, migration of people from rural areas to industrial towns, rapid changes in social and cultural life, and scientific and technological advances led to new methods of communication among people. Democratization of communication meant strengthening of democratic idea. Political democracy led to economic democracy and social reorganization. In all this, the news later produced in various sizes and at different frequencies played an influential role in Germany, Holland, France, and England during 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. By the early 18th century, political leaders realized how powerful an instrument the periodicals were for spreading ideas. Many of them began to produce their own papers to propagate their ideas and influence people such as Whigs and Tories in England. A new force was detected in society, namely the force of public opinion. Consequently, the journalism of the period was largely political in nature, and thus the impression justifiable to a great extent was created that journalism was an adjunct of politics. Avisha Relation Oder Zeitung was the first regular printed newspaper of Europe, which commenced publication 1615. Weekly News was the first newspaper of England that lasted from 1622 to 1641. Next paper there was a fortnight, the Daily Courant, that started publication in 1702. The first printing press in America was established in the South America by Juan Pablos, a Spanish printer in 1539. Boston, capital of Massachusetts colony, became an active center of printing in the 17th century. The Puritans imported the first printing press to New England in 1638 to supply printed materials to Harvard College. The very first newspaper in the US was Public Occurrences, Foreign and Domestic, published by Benjamin Harris, a bookseller in Boston, in 1690. Harris could not continue publication as he was imprisoned by the British authorities for printing without prior consent. Then came another newspaper, the Boston Newsletter, in 1704. The Glorious Revolution of England in 1688, American Revolution 1775-76, and the French Revolution 1789 owe much to the radical and rational thoughts of people such as Thiem, Locke, and Pitt, Robespierre, Hugo, Voltaire, Rousseau, Jefferson, Franklin, Wayne, and Hamilton, etc. Now we talk about evolution of journalism in India. Emperor Asoka's pillar inscriptions and rock edicts in different parts of the Mauryan Empire during 3rd century BC are considered examples of imperial political communication to the informed and literate section of the population. Asoka used the Prakrit language in the communication on ethics and morals as evidenced by his inscriptions. The learning languages were confined to high castes, the aristocracy, priests, army personnel, and landowners. Another feature of communication in ancient India was the emphasis placed on oral and oral systems. Writing was done on palm leaves using a style, but the written documents were considered too sacred to be touched or used by lower classes. Ruling class used certain methods for coding, transmitting, and decoding messages secretly through the network of spies to inform about neighboring enemies. According to historians of journalism, news was collected in well organized manner under Akbar the Great. In 1574, Akbar established a recording office that helps later medieval historians to gather materials for chronicles. First printing press in India. First printing press arrived in India on 6 September 1556 and was installed at the College of St. Paul in Goa. First printed newspaper in India was in English, edited and published by James Augustus Hickey, an employee of East India Company. It was named Bengal Gazette, which came out on 29th January 1780. Soon many other weeklies and monthlies such as Indian Gazette, Calcutta Journal, Bengal Harakoru, John Bull in East came out during the 17th and 18th century. Digdarshan was the first Indian language newspaper. It started in April 1818 by the Serampur missionaries William Carsey, Joshua Marsman, and William Ward. They soon started another journal in June of the same year and named it Samachar Darpan. The famous Raja Ram Mohan Rai also brought out periodicals in English, Bengali, Persian. Some of Roy's papers were Sambat Kumadi, Brahmical Magazine, Miratul Akbar, and Bangaduta and Bengal Herald. Now we talk about Assamese papers. Amnodaya, a distinguished journal in the Assamese language, was started in 1846 under the editorship of renowned Oliver T. Cutter. Then Gujarati newspaper with the greatest longevity of India, Mumbai Samachar, was also the first Gujarati newspaper. It was established in 1822 by Farduji Marjaban as a weekly and then became a daily in 1832. If you talk about Hindi newspaper, the first Hindi daily was Samachar Shubhavarshan, started in Calcutta in 1854. Later, Samayadant, Martand, Banaras Akhbar, Shimla Akhbar, and Malwa Akhbar came out. Calcutta was the birthplace not only of English, Bengali, and Hindi journalism. First Urdu newspaper was published by Urdu Akbar in the second decade of the 19th century. Kannada Samachar was the earliest Kannada journal according to many scholars, but others think that the first Kannada journal was Mangalura Samachar, later Subudhi Prakasha, Kannada Vatika, Amnodaya, Mahila Saki, and Sarbimitra came out during the 18th century. Malayalam Mathrubhumi, Malayala Manorama, Kerala Kanmudi are the main newspapers of Kerala. Other daily newspapers are Desabhimani, Mangalam, Madhyamam, Chandrika, Deepika, etc. If you talk about Marathi, then Darpan was the first Marathi newspaper started on 6 January 1832. Kesari and Sudarak were other papers of the 18th century. Indu Prakash was an Anglo-Marathi daily established in 1862. If you talk about Oriya newspaper, the first Oriya magazine, Junarguna, was published by the Odisha Mission Press in 1849 under editorship of Charles Lacy. Then came another publication from the same press, Prabhat Chandrika, under the editorship of William Lacy. Utkal Sahitya, Bodh Daini, Baleshwar Sambad, Balika, etc. started in the 18th century. If you talk about Punjabi newspaper, then although Maharaja Ranjit Singh encouraged the development of Punjabi journalism, the earliest Punjabi newspaper was Misri newspaper. The first printing press in Punjab was established in Ludhiana in 1809. Tamil Nadu, first editorial Tamil Patrika monthly was brought out in 1831 by the Religious Tract Society in Madras. It lasted till 1833. The next periodical weekly was the Dina Bartamani, published in Madras from 1856 by Dravidian Press and edited by the Revered P. Varsiwal. Later, Swadesh Mitran, Desh Bhaktan, etc. were other papers which published. If you talk about Telugu papers, then Kandukuri, Veera Salingam, Pantulu, known as the father of Renaissance movement in Andhra and the founder of modern Telugu, sparked a social reform movement through his weekly Viveka Vardhini. He also founded separate journals for women, Satihita Bodhini. If you talk about Urdu, then Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, a great educationalist, judge, and social reformer, did much for the development of Urdu journalism. Now we talk about role of Indian press pre-independence. Birth of journalism in India. The history of contemporary journalism belongs with the establishment of the printing press by Christian missionaries in India. The Christian missionaries set up printing press by India at such a time when our country was struggling with several social evils and malpractices like child marriage, sati system, illiteracy, superstitions, etc. Christian missionaries established printing press at the end of 15th century for spreading the messages of Christianity. With the advent of East India Company in India in the year 1600, heavy printing machines were installed in Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta in India in the years 1674, 1772, and 1778, respectively. In India, press was used for journalistic purpose for for the first time in the year 1780. Then we talk about birth of Bengal Gazette. There were two rival groups in the council of then Governor General. One group supporting Warren Hastings, the Governor General, and another group was led by Philip Francis, who himself was aspirant of the post of Governor General. In his patronage, a British named James Augustus Hickey began his publication of a weekly newspaper called Bengal Gazette. Now it also known as Calcutta General Advisor oblique Hickey Gazette. On January 29, 1780, it was a main mainly for Europeans. Its contents were non-serious, spicy, and vulgar. Bengal Gazette claimed itself to be political and commercial newspaper. Hickey described newspaper in the following words: a weekly political and commercial newspaper open to all parties but influenced by none. But in reality, the newspaper was entirely against Warren Hastings and his friend Elijah MP, the Chief Justice of Supreme Court. Bengal Gazette was known for its personal attacks on Hastings and his friends. It had given Warren Hastings several nicknames like Mr. Wronghead, the Great Mughal, the Dictators, etc. The newspaper survived only for 2 years. It was closed down in 1782 with the departure of its patron Philip Francis to rangeland. After Philip, it had faced the hardships imposed by the administration. Hastings seized its types and ordered its closure. An impartial evaluation of the newspaper makes it clear that it can be a pioneer newspaper of India, but its content were not up to the mark. It was away from objectivity and was very biased. It was better to call it the founder of yellow journalism in India instead of founder of Indian journalism. Then we talk about the situations after Bengal Gazette. Hastings established India Gazette in the year 1780 as a voice against Bengal Gazette. India Gazette enjoyed the patronage of Warren Hastings in the form of all facilities from him. Approximately 200 newspaper journals came into existence between 1780 and 1857, but most of them were closed within short duration of time except India Gazette, which longed from 1789 to 1834. Calcutta Gazette 1784 to 1878, Asiatic Mirror 1788 to 1820, the Calcutta Morning Post 1799 to 1878, the Oriental Star 1795 to 1857, Calcutta Monthly Journal 1794 to 1841, and the Bengal Harkaru 1795 to 1857. Some Europeans residing in India were dissatisfied with the politics of East India Company. This led to the birth of Hickey's Gazette, which came to be known as the first newspaper of the country, inspired by some other papers from Madras, Delhi, and Bombay came. Madras Courier 1785, Haraku 1791, Madras Gazette 1795, Bombay Herald 1789, Bombay Gazette 1780, India Gazette 1780, and Voice of India 1882 are among pioneer newspapers of India. Now we talk about freedom fighters in journalism. The journalists in the initial days were mainly foreigners who were promoting the interest of East India Company, their country, or were promoting Christianity in the country. Indian journalism could not take its real shape by the time in true sense. Later, Indian journalism emerged as the mission when some freedom fighters used journalism as the weapon to fight against the British. Akbar Allahabadi, a well known Urdu poet, has said, खैंचो न कमान को न तलवार निकालो जब तोपे हो मुकाबिल तो अखबार निकालो, implying fight the war with the newspaper and not with the sword. Raja Ram Mohan Rai is truly said to be the father of Indian journalism with his inspiration following three newspapers Sambad, Kaumudi, Bengali, Miratut Akbar Persian, and Brahminical magazine in English. Now we talk about Raja Ram Mohan Rai in journalism. Sambad Kodami began under the editorship of Bhavani Charan Banerjee, but Banerjee left the newspaper after 13 issues because of the dispute with Roy on the points of sati system and other political reforms, social reforms. Banerjee launched a separate newspaper called Samachar Chandrika and promoted staunch Hindu values with its help. With the inspiration of Raja Ram Mohan Rai, three more newspapers continued their publication between 1821 and 1891. They were the Reformer, the Inquirer, and Gyan Anveshan. All these newspapers were the promoters of aggressive Hinduism. 1857 revolt and the press laws. The number of newspapers in India language before Sepoy Mutiny of 1857 was very negligible. Most of the newspapers were published by Christian missionaries when Charles Metcalfe succeeded William Bentinck for some time. He passed such a responsible press law which allowed publication with some restrictions but without government's approval. Charles Metcalfe ignored the suggestions of friends to monitor the Indian newspapers. He even refused to differentiate between English and vernacular newspapers. The attitude of British government towards Indian press changed considerably after the 1857 revolt. Press of Bombay, Bengal and Madras did not show considerable interest in the revolt. British press went aggressive after the revolt and presented the revolt negatively. Lord Canning's liberal policies were criticized by the British press, but the Indian press did not come forward to raise a voice against the poisonous attitude of British press. The rebellion of 1857 created a wide gulf between owners of the English and vernacular language press. This gulf gradually got widened. This divide was very much conspicuous from 1920 onwards with the advent of Mahatma Gandhi and the scenario of the freedom struggle. Now we talk about journalism and social reforms. Some of the vernacular languages newspapers of Bombay were inclined toward the social reforms. Bal Shastri Jambelkar began publishing an Anglo-Marathi fortnight and a Marathi fortnight called Dik in the year 1832 and 1842 respectively. And the newspaper Prabhakar also championed the cause of social reforms. Gopal Rao Deshmukh, a well-known social worker, used to write for the newspaper. He also wrote some other newspapers like Gyan Prakash, Indu Prakash, and Lokhit Varta. His articles were mainly on the social issues. He advocated social reforms with cooperation from the British government. Deshmukh initiated Indu Prakash and Anglo-Marathi Delhi in the year 1861. Vishnu Shastri Pandit was the editor of Mahagobind Ranade, was columnist in that. Social reform was the main goal of the publication. This was the time when intellectuals from Western India got attracted towards journalism one way or other. They looked journalism as a powerful means of expression. Mahagobind Ranade used journalism and staged through his life to fight the freedom struggle. He is also known for his campaign for widow marriage. He organized conference for the journalists of vernacular press. This conference was aimed to protest against the Vernacular Press Act 1878. This was the time Bal Gangadhar Tilak and his follower Sri Agarkar were planning to initiate Kesari and Maratha in Marathi and English language from Pune. Ranade also came forward to give his support to Tilak and Agarkar. From 1884 to 1891, the well-known social reformer Behram Malabari used the Indian press to raise voice against the evils and malpractices of the contemporary Hindi society. Social reforms of Malabari and Karsan Das went on simultaneously through both had a different methodology of working. Karan Das launched campaign for widow marriage while Malabari was trying to uplift the Dalits and marginalized sections of the society. He launched a countrywide program for discouraging child marriage. Both the reformers were ardent advocates of English language. Revolutionary Vasudev Phatke 1945 to 1883 was another supporter of the vernacular press of the year. He was termed as the revolutionary by the British government because of his revolutionary step taken against the British Raj in India. History of the initial days of Indian journalism were represented by newspapers like Hindu, a weekly by C. Subramaniam Iyer from Madras. Amrit Bazar Petrika, edited by Motilal Ghosh from Calcutta. Hindu Patriot by Harish Chandra Mukherjee from Calcutta. Indian Patriot from Malabar, Kerala. Dr. George Bust, who was the editor of Bombay Times at the time of Revolution of 87, strongly recommended the actions against the Indians by the British administration. Bombay government did not take care to punish the editor, but Nauroji Fardunji, a shareholder of the newspaper, told him to give an assurance in writing to keep his voice low. On his refusal, Robert Knight was made the editor in place of Bust. In 1861, Bombay Times, the Courier, and the Telegraph were emerged. Times of India was established in the soaring heights of success. Three important Anglo-Indian newspapers, Pioneer from Allahabad, Civil and Military Gazette from Lahore, and Statesman from Calcutta came into being during this period. Another paper, Madras Mail, is also worth mentioning because it is credited the first evening newspaper of the country. Hindu followed it. Delhi edition of the Statesman came into being when Delhi became the capital of the country. Viewpoint of the Times of India became more nationalist under the editorship of Sir Stanley Reed. Editorials of Times of India started gaining popularity in the Second World War. Its editorial articles were considered to be unique. Times of India was the first newspaper which had an Indian war reporter. In 1861, there were 17 vernacular newspapers that included 11 Urdu, 6 Hindi, and one newspaper by Miss Reed. Two renowned newspapers from 1878 onwards were Sachidananda Sinha's Indian People from Allahabad, and Hindustan Review, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya's leader from Allahabad in 1909. Dayal Singh Maitya's Tribune from Lahore. After 1857, the Indian press, especially the vernacular press, witnessed the atrocities of British government. During period of British Crown had taken over the administration from the East India Company, 1859, Lord Canning became the Viceroy of India and was implemented the Indian Penal Code in 1860. The then public opinion of country was much influenced by the newspapers from Bengal like Neel Darpan, The Hindu, Patriot, Som Prakash, Indian Mirror, and Bengal. The scenario of Indian journalism witnessed a sea change with the publication of Amrit Bazar Patrika. Earlier it was the Bengali language but switched to English language overnight with vernacular press act being passed. Now we talk about Gandhi's contribution to journalism. Country was experiencing the environment of freedom struggle which gave impetus to the mission of journalism. Many patriot journalists began publication of newspaper on the name of independence. Newspapers were considered by such journalists for the freedom struggle. Various freedom fighters joined English vernacular press for fighting against the British government for freedom. Gandhiji once said, understanding and expressing the public opinion is the first objective of journalism. The second is expression of public aspirations, and the third is the expression of the shortcomings of the popular beliefs. The prominent newspaper of that time were Bande Mataram in Hindi, Kesari and Maratha in Marathi, Swadesh Mitram in Tamil, Amrit Bazar Patrika, National Herald, the Civil Military Gazette, Free Press Journal, Bombay Chronicle, The Leader, The Tribune, Madras and Hindutva. All English. In the 20th century, various Hindi newspapers came into being. Mahatma Madan Mohan Malviya began the publication of Abhyudaya in 1907. Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi began Pratap in 1913 from Kanpur, while Mahendra Chandra in 1916. In 1920, Babu Shiv Prasad Gupta from Banaras initiated Aaj. The period witnessed the beginning of several important Urdu newspapers as well as Maulana Abul Kalam Azad began Al Hilal in 1912 from Calcutta. Hamdam came into being by Abdul Bari in Lucknow. Anish Ahmad Abbashi established weekly Hakikat, which later on converted into a daily. Mahashay Krishnan in Lahore established Pratap, the well-known Urdu daily newspaper in 1990. After partition, publication of Pratap shifted to Delhi. In 1923, Mahashay Kaushal Chand established Milap. Milap also shifted to Delhi after partition. Pratap and Milap are the two prominent newspapers that are still being published. The rising era commenced with Udan Martan. Pandit Jugal Kishore Shukal began the publication of Udan Martan, The Rising Sun from Calcutta in 1826. There are controversies about the exact date. According to some opinion, the first issue came into being May 30, 1826, while according to J. Natarajan's book, History of Indian Journalism, the date of publication was February 9, 1826. Pandit Shukla was the editor of well-known publisher. He was the first independent Hindi newspaper of its kind. The publication was closed down December 4, 1827 due to financial crisis. Pandit Shukla also began the publication of Samdand Martand. Different era of journalism. Hindi prose and poetry both witnessed tremendous development due to concerned efforts of Bhartendu Harishchandra. The period is called as Bhartendu era. Almost 2 dozen newspapers came into existence because of his role. He himself began the publication of several newspapers or journals. Important among them are Kavi Vachan Sudha in 1867, Harishchandra magazine, Harishchandra Chandrika in 1874, and Bala Bodhini in 1874. All these magazines were inclined towards social reforms and elimination of the caste system. Hindi language became very rich by Dwivedi and Tilak era. This period is also known as the publication of several literacy and patriotic newspapers. This age came to be known as Dwivedi era because of the dedicated literacy journalism of Pandit Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi. Gandhian era is mainly known for the journalistic works of Mahatma Gandhi. He had excelled command over English and Gujarati language. His pieces of writing were very simple and encouraging. He began the publication of English newspaper Young India with Tarun Bharat as the Hindi edition. The literary magazine Madhuri also came out during the period in 1922. Premchand and Surjkant Nirala were also associated with the magazine for some time. Premchand established Hans from Varanasi in 1930. After Saraswati and Vishal Bharat, Hans was the most revolutionary magazine of that time. Aaj was a very popular newspaper of that time. In 1933, the Hindi version of Hindustan Times came into existence. Navbharat in 1938 from Nagpur, Arjbrat 1942 from Patna, Vishwabandhu 1942 from Lahore, and Dainik Jagran 1942 from Kanpur were also came out in Hindi. Now we talk about the Indian press at independence and today. In 1947, the major English newspaper India were Times of India in Bombay, Statesman in Calcutta, Hindu Madras, Hindustan Times Delhi, Pioneer Lucknow, Indian Express Bombay and Madras, Amrit Bazar Patrika in Calcutta, National Herald Lucknow, Mail Madras, and Hitwada Nagpur. Of these, the Times of India, Statesman, and Pioneer were under British ownership till 1964 when it came under the group of Indian Business. During the long struggle of India's independence, the major English newspapers that served the national cause were the Hindu in 1878, Amrit Bazar Patrika in 1878, 68, Bombay Chronicle 1913, Free Press Journal 1930, later it became Indian Express, and Hindustan Times 1924. Among the Indian language newspapers, the prominent ones were Aaj 1920, Anand Bazar Patrika 1922, Shakal 1931, Swadesh Mitran 1882, Mumbai Samachar 1822, Malayala Manorva 1890, and Madhrubhumi 1930. Hindi newspapers have the largest total circulation in India. Hindi is the main language of 10 Indian states: Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Delhi, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttaranchal, and Uttar Pradesh. Certain trends in communication and journalism throughout the modern world prompted several sociologists and media experts to discuss the desirability of and re-examining trends in the lights of basic issues. In other words, back to the basics, say the experts, this is where Gandhi became relevant. High technology is good, but if it doesn't be able to solve the basic problems confronting the and succeed in catering for the greed of the few to the exclusion of need of the many, as it has done through the recent decades and in all countries and experienced colonial subjugation in the past. Now we talk about Press Trust of India. It is the largest news agency in India. It is headquartered in Delhi and is a non-profit cooperative among more than 450 Indian newspapers and has a staff of about 2,000 writers spread across 150 offices nationwide. It took over the Indian operations of the Associated Press and Reuters soon after India's independence from 15 August 1947. It provides news coverage and information of the region in both English and Hindi. It exchanges information with several other news agencies, including 100 news agencies based outside India, such as the Associated Press, Agence France Presse, the New York Times, and Bloomberg LP. Major Indian subscribers of PTI include Times of India, Indian Express, Hindustan Times, All India Radio, and Doordarshan. PTI has a wide global presence with offices in Bangkok, Beijing, Colombo, Dubai, Islamabad, Kuala Lumpur, Moscow, New York, and Washington DC. Press Trust India is only news agency in South Asia which operates its own communication satellite INSAT to broadcast news and information. Its current chairman is Mr. V.K. Chopra. It is the largest news agency in India, headquartered in Delhi, and a non-profit cooperative among more than 450 Indian newspapers. So, with this, Friends, we come to the end of uh, today's class. See you soon. Thank you. Good.